The moment I saw my ex-wife kneeling on the front lawn, begging a stranger not to sell the house, my heart nearly stopped. She had no idea that the man standing a few feet away, holding the keys she thought belonged to someone else, was the same man she had divorced 6 years earlier. She looked exhausted, frightened, and desperate, and for a few seconds I forgot every painful memory between us. I only saw the woman I had once promised to love forever. Before I tell you what happened next, if you believe people deserve kindness, second chances, and sometimes a little mercy when life has been cruel to them, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You never know whose heart might be changed by a story about forgiveness. My name is Michael, and this happened in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. 6 years earlier, my marriage to Rebecca had ended in a way neither of us had imagined. We had been together for 11 years. We had built a home, celebrated birthdays, endured job losses, and dreamed about growing old together. But somewhere along the way, resentment replaced affection. Small disagreements became arguments. Arguments became silence. And eventually, silence became two strangers sleeping under the same roof. The divorce was ugly. Not because we hated each other, but because we had both been hurt too many times. Rebecca believed I cared more about work than our family. I believed she had stopped believing in me long before she stopped loving me. When the papers were finally signed, I walked away with almost nothing, except a small apartment, an old pickup truck, and a heart that felt like it had been hollowed out. What Rebecca never knew was that my grandfather had left me an inheritance. It wasn't enormous, but it included a modest rental property in a beautiful neighborhood. I kept it private because I didn't want money to become another weapon between us. I renovated the house slowly, hired a property manager named Jonathan, and eventually rented it to a tenant under a management company. I never told Rebecca that the property belonged to me. Years passed. I rebuilt my life. I became calmer, more patient, and less interested in proving myself right. I even started volunteering at a local church food pantry, where I met an elderly woman named Martha, who taught me something I had forgotten. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about deciding someone deserves it. Sometimes forgiveness is about deciding you deserve peace. Then, one spring afternoon, Jonathan called me. The tenant had fallen behind on rent and had asked for more time. I expected the usual story, but Jonathan told me something that stopped me cold. The tenant was Rebecca. I drove to the property the following weekend and parked across the street. I saw her carrying grocery bags into the house. She looked older. Not old, just tired in a way that made me realize life had been harder on her than I had imagined. I almost walked up to the door, but pride stopped me. Over the next few months, I quietly instructed Jonathan never to threaten eviction. Rebecca had lost her job after the small company she worked for closed, and she was taking temporary work wherever she could find it. She was also caring for her mother, Patricia, who had become seriously ill. The rent was becoming impossible. Then came the day that changed everything. I had decided to sell the house. I needed the money to help fund a small community housing project I had been planning with my church. Jonathan arranged for a potential buyer, a man named Stephen, to inspect the property. I came along because I wanted to make sure the transaction went smoothly. Rebecca came outside, just as Stephen was looking over the yard. She didn't recognize me immediately. I was standing several feet away, wearing a jacket and cap, and 6 years had changed my face more than I realized. But when she noticed the papers in Stephen's hand, panic flashed across her face. She hurried toward us, and then, overwhelmed by fear, she dropped to her knees on the grass. She begged Stephen not to sell the house. She explained that her mother couldn't be moved easily, that she had finally found stability, and that losing the home would leave them with nowhere to go. I stood frozen. This was the woman who had once told me she never wanted to see me again. The woman whose signature had ended our marriage. Yet here she was, pleading for the home that unknowingly belonged to me. When she finally looked up and recognized me, the color drained from her face. For several seconds, neither of us moved. She looked at the house, then at me, then at the keys in my hand. Everything suddenly made sense to her. I wasn't the buyer. I wasn't the real estate agent. I was the landlord. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I could have reminded her of every cruel thing she had said during our divorce. I could have told her that she was finally experiencing the helplessness I had once felt. I could have sold the house and walked away with the profit. Instead, I remembered something my grandfather used to say: if you have the power to make someone's burden lighter, don't become another stone they have to carry. I told Rebecca I wasn't going to sell the house. She began to cry. But I wasn't finished. I told her she could stay. I would reduce the rent to an amount she could realistically afford. And while she worked to rebuild her life, she wouldn't have to worry about losing her home. I also offered to cover the repairs the house needed. Rebecca stared at me as though she couldn't understand why I was helping her. The truth was, I wasn't helping the woman who had divorced me. I was helping a human being who was hurting. Months passed. Rebecca found steady work at a medical office. Her mother's health stabilized. She started paying the reduced rent on time. Slowly, the fear disappeared from her face. We didn't get remarried. We didn't pretend the past never happened. Some wounds leave scars, and some relationships are better healed from a respectful distance. But something beautiful happened. We forgave each other. One evening, I visited the house to check on a repair. Rebecca was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. She thanked me for what I had done. But I told her she didn't owe me gratitude. I told her that sometimes life gives us a chance to become the person we wish we had been years earlier. She smiled through tears. And as I drove away that evening, I realized something I had spent years refusing to understand. Winning the divorce had never been the victory. Getting even had never been the victory. The real victory was reaching a point where I could look at someone who had broken my heart and still choose compassion. Because sometimes the greatest second chance isn't getting someone back. Sometimes it's getting your own heart back. And that was the day I stopped seeing Rebecca as my ex-wife. I simply saw her as someone who needed a little kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes forgiveness still matters, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may be carrying anger, regret, or pain they have held onto for far too long. And before you go, I want you to comment one word below: forgiven. Maybe someone reading your comment today needs to be reminded that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply refuses to let the past control the future. Sometimes, a house is more than 4 walls and a roof. Sometimes it becomes the place where 2 broken people finally learn that kindness can rebuild what pride destroyed.